You're watching CarTell TV and I'm Simone. Jenny recently reviewed the Kia Seltos with a 2-litre engine, front-wheel drive and a CVT in the Sport Plus trim, the second highest of 4 trim levels for Kia's amazing subcompact SUV. That one started from just under $33,000. The 2 lower trim levels slotted within a price range of just $7,000. The entry-level S with a CVT starting from about $26,000 and the Sport with the CVT at $29,500. So that's 3 trim levels within $7,000. However, if you want to make that extra step to the GT line with the 1.6-litre turbo and DCT gearbox, as well as some other top trim perks, you need a full $9,000 over the Sport Plus. That's a significant difference, so the GT line really needs to have something special to justify that kind of a leap. Today, I've got myself one to see if it does. Jenny called the Sport Plus in her previous review pick of the bunch, due to the fact that it comes pretty packed and can be upgraded with a number of optional features, which would also make it closer to the GT line in terms of price. However, even our biggest gripes on paper, the CVT and the lesser engine in the one we tested, were actually a pretty pleasant surprise. Not spectacular, but also not lacking. So now we get to compare it to this 1.6-litre turbo and see if it really is worth the extra money. In terms of looks, it shares the vast majority of features with the Sport Plus, of course. The boxy silhouette, modern front fascia, cleverly weighted features and cool wheels reserved only for the GT line look really good. It's important to note that the biggest standard wheels of the GT line are 18 inches. While some competitors offer bigger wheels in their top trims, I'd say this isn't a downside for the Seltos. 18 inches on a subcompact is not small by any means, and larger wheels can negatively impact ride quality. Honestly, looking at the Seltos with these 18-inch rims, they look pretty spot on. We already praised the rear design of the Seltos, usually everyone's least favourite part of almost any SUV, and I just have to say how nice it looks. What I really like is that it stands out without being vulgar. So I can imagine a millennial driving this as much as I can grandma, gently gliding down the city streets. And that tells us a lot about the success of this design. The GT line has other dedicated features, such as premium black grille mesh and satin silver belt line and door handles. Right, enough about that, let's get to the guts of this review. The engine! I finally get to spend a few days with the 1.6-litre turbo petrol all-wheel drive Seltos. Now let me give you the specs first. So the lesser naturally aspirated 2-litre MPI pushes out 110 kilowatts of power and 180 newton meters of torque, understandably a bit higher in the RPM range. When we tested the CVT, we were all really pleasantly surprised with how well it performed, and it still felt smooth and relaxed. This 1.6-litre turbo DCT is for those of you who want something that feels a little sportier. It produces 130 kilowatts of power and 265 newton meters of torque, the latter in a very wide span between 1,500 and 4,500 revs. It's also all-wheel drive only, and it's paired with a 7-speed dual-clutch as standard. All of these things are optional extras on the Sport Plus. Officially, this setup consumes 7.6 litres per 100 kilometres on average, 9.5 litres in the city and 6.3 litres extra urban. Some buyers will want to know that the turbo has shorter service intervals. Now, services aren't that expensive in a car like this, but still worth a mention. Now let's see what the 1.6-litre turbo is like behind the wheel. It's definitely better than the 2-litre. The power difference isn't huge, and the CVT we had in the Sport Plus was a very nice surprise, but the 1.6-litre with a DCT gearbox just feels a lot better. There's no need to rev it as high, the top torque is present in pretty much all the revs you'll ever need, and the dual-clutch gearbox is fast and deliciously smooth. I still miss the point of dual-clutch gearboxes in cars that aren't performance-oriented, but I do have to say it's a joy to drive. Anyway, back to the engine. Do you really need the 1.6-litre turbo? Well, honestly, the 2-litre is sufficient. Do you want the 1.6-litre turbo? Yes, definitely. It really feels different to drive. Punchier, more ready to pull and with greater force. You feel the difference from the first moment behind the wheel, but you really start to enjoy it after a few days once you get to know the car and its abilities and you're more confident in your driving choices. For example, it's much easier to measure overtaking in this car than it was in the 2-litre. Yes, the engine is more modern, more complicated, under more stress and less fuel efficient, especially when pushed harder. But it also gives more joy behind the wheel. You know, the sensible side says the 2-litre is enough, but the fun side wants that turbo. The Australian suspension tune works its charm again. The body is very composed and the steering perfectly weighted. It was obvious in the Sport Plus as well, but handling really shines in the GT Line Seltos. The Seltos is by no means a sports car. Now, if you really want proper performance, then you're looking in the wrong segment. But if you want a small, stylish SUV that can be fun to drive, then the Seltos with this engine is a very nice choice. I also mentioned the GT Line is all-wheel drive as standard. Don't mistake that for any kind of proper off-road ability. Okay, this is a part-time all-wheel drive with lock mode, and while it's definitely more capable than the front-wheel drive only version, it's not intended to be venturing far off the beaten track. The main benefit of the Seltos in any trim level is the interior space. When we compare it to its sister model, the Hyundai Kona, which is around the same size as the Seltos, the difference in space for rear passengers is pretty remarkable. The Seltos really feels like a bigger car on the inside, while keeping the same dimensions. Legroom is particularly generous. 2 adults in the back will have more space than should be possible in a subcompact. In this trim, they'll also get rear air vents, a USB charging point, 2 cup holders, 2 bottle holders, and a cool little space for your phone. That's different. Up front in this top trim level, the materials are pretty good. The premium steering wheel feels really nice. The premium seats come as standard only on the GT Line, and they're comfortable and electrically adjustable 10-way for the driver and 8-way for the front passenger. In this trim, they're also heated and ventilated. Overall, the layout is modern and practical. Oh, and the infotainment screen is just awesome. It comes with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, sat-nav, and loads of modern features, and all of that is presented on a nice 10.25-inch screen. It really feels like it's an added benefit in this segment, and it's available in all trims except the entry-level S. This top trim also gets tilt and slide sunroof as standard, as well as 7-inch colour supervision instrument cluster, colour head-up display with digital speedometer, Bose premium sound system, and wireless charging. The boot is okay. It has decent space and no load lip. Oh, and full-size spare. It takes 433 litres with the second row in use and 1,393 litres with the seats folded. When folded, the seat backs are slightly angled, but not significantly so. We also praised safety, and there is a lot to praise. The base trim level gets ABS, traction control, electronic stability, downhill brake control, cruise control, hill start assist, rear parking sensors, rear view camera with dynamic guidelines, lane keep assist, driver attention alert, automatic emergency braking and forward collision warning, etc. The Sport Plus that we reviewed had front parking sensors, auto dimming rear view mirror, blind spot detection, lane change assist, rear cross traffic alert, Driver Attention Alert Plus, Advanced Smart Cruise Control, Cyclist Avoidance for the Forward Collision Warning System, and a smart key with push-button start. Once again, the Sport Plus is a really good choice. This one adds LED DRLs, LED front fog lights, rain sensing wipers, and lane following assist. The top 2 trim levels also get upgraded brakes and multi-link rear suspension in the all-wheel drive versions. If it doesn't seem like the GT Line adds a lot in terms of safety, it's because the S and Sport Plus are so well equipped that there's not much to add. So, how good is the GT Line Seltos? Is it worth the extra money over the Sport Plus? Compared with the starting version of the Sport Plus, it definitely is. It adds a few exterior perks that make the already nice design stand out even more. The interior gets loads of very nice upgrades reserved only for this trim, and it gets that punchy 1.6 litre with all-wheel drive and dual-clutch gearbox as standard. However, many of those things can be added as options to the Sport Plus, and with $9,000 of difference, well, that's a lot of room for adding options. It boils down to how far with the upgrades you're willing to go. If you really like the Sport Plus but think you could do with a few upgrades, then maybe you could save some money by just going for the optional extras instead of the GT Line. But if that option ticking hand of yours is going wild and you're getting up in price close to the GT Line, then why not just enjoy the extra interior upgrades of the GT Line? As for the engine, I'd definitely go for the 1.6 litre. Sure, it's more expensive, its service intervals are shorter and it consumes more fuel, but we're talking about a subcompact Kia. It's not like its services cost the same as a Ferrari's, and it's not like its petrol consumption is 5 litres more than the 2 litre. The difference is small, and the extra punch really makes the Seltos more interesting to drive. Thanks for watching CarTell TV. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and follow us on the socials. Now, it's a really tough choice between the CVT and the Turbo, and it really just comes down to which you'd prefer. Let me know in the comments below.